Good evening and welcome to Ask the Mayor. I'm Kurt Morris, the mayor of San Dimas, and to my right, the handsome young man is Ken Duran, and he is the city manager of San Dimas. And we have a few things that we're prepared to talk to you about tonight, things that we think are important and hopefully you'll find interesting. But the primary purpose of this program is to give you an opportunity to tell us what you'd like to talk about. And you can do that by calling us at the number on the screen and asking questions, making comments, or whatever you'd like to do. We like to hope that this is really your program and we're here to try to supply information. So good evening, Ken. And
good evening, Kurt. How are you?
I'm okay. How about you?
I'm okay. A little bit warm out there today, but
it was a little warm.
Yeah, so I guess
warmer tomorrow, right?
Yeah, so I guess we're into the summer season. One of the things that I thought we would at least open up and start talking about tonight, hopefully we'll get some calls to interrupt our discussion, but obviously in the region we had some earthquakes last week. And I know I felt a couple of them, and they were far away. And whenever we have an earthquake event, it's always a reminder that we are in earthquake country. And as all the experts have said with the quakes in Ridgecrest, they aren't technically going to trigger any event on the San Andreas Fault, which is our biggest fault here in Southern California, but we're long overdue for a significant event on the San Andreas Fault. And there's no better time, from our experience, to get people reminded that they need to be prepared than after an event like this. Because the longer you get away from that event, people start to out of sight, out of mind, and they don't want to think about it. So I thought I would take a little bit of time maybe and provide some tips for the community on just the essentials of being prepared. We posted some information on our website, and I know our website is on the screen. And as I always say, that's the main source of information for you to get information about anything that's going on in the city. But there's a really good and comprehensive emergency preparedness guide on our website that you can go to. But I think the takeaways when you looked at some of the media coverage up in the Ridgecrest area and the lack of supplies and utilities that were cut off, the main emphasis that we want to try and get out to the community is you need to be personally prepared, because you can't rely on either the city or the fire department or other governmental agencies to be able to provide all those services to all those people right after an event. So personal preparedness is the most important thing that you can focus on. And if you go to our website, there's a lot of good information about how to do that. And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by it. It's like, oh, I've got to go out and I've got to buy an emergency preparedness kit, and I've got to buy all these supplies. But there are some really good ways that you can incrementally prepare yourself. For example, there's on the website, there's a program that talks about a 12-week plan to prepare yourself with supplies. So you don't have to run out tomorrow and go to Costco and buy all your water and all of your supplies, but it's make a list of what you need, and then over the next 12 weeks, every time you go to the grocery store, just pick up one extra case of water.
Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Mayor Morris. This is Marcella Sewell. Ken Duran and you are right. We just have to have a kit ready. That's what I have in my home here in San Dimas. I have in case somebody hurts the arm or something like that, I have braces and things like that for them, and I just have Band-Aids. I have alcohol ready for, bruises and different things,
I was wondering about the alcohol.
For bruises and stuff,
Okay.
I bumped my knee when the 7.1 hit, and I hurt myself pretty bad on my table. So, you do have to have things prepared, for when the big one comes someday. But the most important thing, FEMA comes in late because my relatives on the Gulf Coast, when Hurricane Katrina hit, it took FEMA a long time to come in there and help repair their homes. But you need earthquake insurance, a lot of things like that. Make sure you have medical insurance, and things, because I know they have triages set up in certain facilities, right, Mayor Morris?
Yeah. Do you have water?
Yes, I have water, lots of water.
Because
you
I
know.
noticed in Trona, one of the things there, and there's not much in Trona to be damaged, but the water system was off for a while. And,
Right.
and I know that people were saying, well, why can't they get the pipes fixed? Well, one of the problems with a municipal kind of water system is you not only have to get the pipes fixed, you have to make sure they're disinfected and that they're clean, and that sometimes takes a while. So water is, you get thirsty before you get hungry. So that water is a real important part there. But I think, as Ken was going through, the website's got a way that you can do this, so you don't say, well, what do I get? It gives good guidance. So we're going to let him continue talking about that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
go and with that. But you're right, we do need to do this.
Yeah,
And I'm
I
glad
have
you're prepared.
Yeah, I'm prepared. I keep 5 gallons of Arrowhead water in my home, and I get, like 10 of them, each time, so I have a lot of water. I'm prepared with the water thing.
Well,
Thank
I think
you for listening to me.
I think that's number one. That water is vital. But we're going to listen. We're going to listen to the rest of Ken's of the things that are kind of what people really need to get to right now. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks
bye-bye.
for calling. Bye.
Yeah, since you touched on the water, and again, if you look at that information on the website, you have sources of water in your house that you don't realize. For example, if you have a tanked water heater that's full of water, which is clean water,
Yes.
and you can, there's a way that you can tap into that water, and it's clean, it's pure, and it's actually drinkable right from the tank. So that's a source. There's other sources. There's ways that you can, boil water. If you have a pool, you can use pool water that's boiled, obviously, to get the chemicals out. So it's just understanding those sources. But going back to the incremental kit, so if you really sit down and make a list of the supplies that you need, and as I said, over the course of 12 weeks or however long, every time you go to the grocery store, just pick up a couple of extra things and then set them aside, and they say, I'm starting to build my emergency kit, whether it's Band-Aids or rubbing alcohol that she referred to, or canned food. And then once you get your kit built up, then it's easier to then, on a monthly basis, just rotate all those supplies out. Because if you've got canned food in there, just take the cans out, put them in your pantry, and buy new canned food that's for your kit. So I think people just get overwhelmed that this is too big of a task, and then they just put it out of their mind. A couple other things that are really important are having some kind of an emergency kit in your car, because you may be at work, you may be on the highway when an earthquake or a wildfire hits, and it's a really good idea, again, to have those kinds of supplies in your car. In my case, I have an emergency kit, which was one that was prepackaged that I bought. But you don't have to do that. You can do the same thing as your home preparedness. Just, again, buy a little bit of supplies, get a duffel bag or a bag or something, and just put it in your car and just keep rotating those items. Same thing with comfortable clothing. I'm saying a lot of this stuff, and I don't practice entirely what I preach, but
I was going to ask.
no, I do have the emergency kit. But the other thing is, it's a good idea to have a bag in your car or at your workplace of comfortable clothing. For example, the way I'm dressed today, if I had to be here at the city for 2 or 3 days, this would probably be not the best clothing to wear. Good to have a pair of tennis shoes, jeans, sweatshirt, different clothing for different climates, just in your car or in your office, because you never know if you're going to be stranded at a location outside of your home. That's another good kit or idea.
Yes.
And in addition to that, the other really important thing to think about are things like prescription glasses, medications, those kinds of things that if you're not able to get back to your home and get those, especially medications, having a supply with you at all times, whether it's at your office or in your car, that's a real important tip.
I hadn't even thought of that, but that really is, because if it's at your home and you can't get there.
Yeah, especially if it's life-threatening
Yeah, the
medications
things that
that you
are-
take on a daily basis. Think about the fact that if you have insulin or some other things that if you don't have a supply of 3 or 4 days with you, what's that going to mean?
Yeah.
And if you look at, again, the Ridgecrest situation, most of the supermarkets, drugstores were closed down for several days, and it's not like you can walk in and get a prescription filled. So that's another important element to think about. And the other one that a lot of people really don't think about is your pets. Same thing with supplying or keeping supplies of food and water for yourself, but how many people wait till they run out of dog food or cat food, or you got the last couple bits of kibble and then it's time to go buy it. Just think of the fact that if there was a major event and you were totally out of dog or cat food, and there's no supply for it, you need to stock up on those kinds of things for your animals as well.
I tend to buy gasoline at Costco when the yellow light comes on.
Well, and
that's probably not a good
that's not a
plan.
good- A couple other good tips, again, if you go on our website, is just think about the fact that, again, in major events like happened last week, gas stations, if they don't have electricity, can't pump gas. If they don't have credit card or their electricity's down, they can't take credit cards. So it's always a good practice to not let your gas tank get below half. And again, I don't practice what I preach all the time. I'm the same as you. It's wait till the light comes on. And the other thing is to have a modest amount of cash with you at all times, because again, it's not like you're stuck someplace, and again, if the electricity's out, you can run to the ATM and take out $40 or $60, but at least have a little bit of cash with you in the event that you're in a situation where it's only a cash-based purchase situation, where you've got a little bit of money with you. Those are just some really basic tips to think about.
I know that particularly in earthquakes are that the personal kind of survival things is very important, because your house may be damaged, may have all those things that it's not like a fire where it burns you out and you have to go to the shelter, but it's so widespread that there may not be any other places to go. But what kind of plans does the city have? What would we do here in the event of an earthquake?
I'm glad you asked that, because that segues right into the next part.
I thought you probably were going to say that. So
the city does have a disaster plan, because one of our primary responsibilities as a city organization is to care for our residents in the event of an emergency. By state law, all of city employees, once they're hired, become disaster preparedness workers, which means they take an oath of office that in the event of an emergency, obviously they need to take care of their family and make sure that's taken care of, but they have responsibilities to report to the city and help us take care of our residents. So we have a disaster plan which identifies a myriad of disasters, earthquakes, wildfires, and so forth, and how we will respond as an organization to take care of our community. We have all of our employees are pre-designated as far as what their responsibilities are. Some of our employees are trained to handle care and shelter, which means if we have to open up an emergency evacuation center or a shelter, we have employees that have actually been specifically trained on how to do that. We have employees that are trained on how to obtain supplies. It's our logistics team. And there's a whole process of how we work with the county and our neighboring jurisdictions, that if there's an event that's beyond our capabilities and we need to get, whether it's a tractor or a backhoe or personnel or supplies, there's a process that we go through to obtain those from other jurisdictions. So our staff has been trained to do that. So we are well trained in how to do those things. We have an emergency operations center, which is basically, it's a location where our management staff would go to, and we would manage that event if there's an event that requires us to be in one location and manage that. In our case, it's at our sheriff's department. We're well equipped with computers and all the supplies that we need to be able to manage that emergency. The key, though, is if there's something that happens after hours, let's say it's in the middle of the night, and we have employees who live all over the region, can they get here? And so we have protocols on how our employees will be notified after hours and how to report in. And there's also this kind of a mutual aid process where we tell employees, if you can't physically get to San Dimas, to our emergency center, because roads are blocked, bridges are down, then you can report to your own city where you live, if you can get there, and identify yourself as a city worker and say, I've been trained as a logistics person. And we would assume that employees from other cities that live in San Dimas or in our vicinity would do the same thing. If they can't get to their jurisdiction, they would come to San Dimas and say, I'm trained to do this, do you need my help?
I don't know how valuable all of the retired and still active city managers who live in San Dimas would be, but
I would hope if you're out there and you want to come in, you're more than welcome to. But getting back to the personal preparedness, there is another way that you can become even more prepared, and the city does have a CERT program. We just recently, in the last year and a half, put together a program which CERT is, it's community urban search and rescue program. It's primarily put on by the fire department as far as training, and it's a program where it's designed for just anyone in the community who wants to be better prepared to go through it's a 6-week program, and you can get some training on just personal preparedness, basic first aid, and just basically how to be more prepared for your personal life. But also, if you would also like to volunteer and be a volunteer with the city, you can do that as well. And it just so happens, the timing of this is very coincidental, but there is a new a training program that is being sponsored by the fire department and our CERT program here in San Dimas, that actually the training is going to be in San Dimas. And it's as I said, it's a 5-week program, and it starts on Wednesday, September 4th. And there are 4 weeks it's a 3-hour class once a week, and then the last class is on a Saturday. It's an 8-hour class. It's free, there's no cost. There is a limit as to the number of people that can sign up for it. But if you go to the city's website, again, there's information where you can actually find out how to register for that program. And as I said, it's a training program that you can use for your own personal preparedness, or if you want to be a leader in your neighborhood. There are some communities that have Neighborhood Watch, and I know that there are some people who get the training for this program and are part of a Neighborhood Watch program, and that way you can be an asset to your neighborhood. And then we also have, like I said, our organized CERT program, where if you want to go above and beyond after you receive this training and you want to become a volunteer, so that if there is a need for the city to have volunteers help us in a disaster, then the CERT team can actually come out and assist us with traffic control or other areas that we might need assistance during an emergency. So again, it's a free program. If you're interested, it starts, like I said, on Wednesday, September 4th, and it ends on Saturday, September 28th. 5-week program, free of charge. If you have any interest, go on the city's website, and you can get more information about that.
good, good. And we're also our team is actually looking for people who would like to be more involved. And you can start with this program, and then they have continuing training, and it's actually, I think it's coming along pretty well.
Yeah, it is. And again, it all goes back to you hear this time and time again whenever there's a disaster, that personal preparedness is the key, because in that first 72 hours or longer, for example, if that 7.1 earthquake was on the San Andreas Fault here in the urbanized area of Southern California, the amount of damage would be significantly more than it was in the
Yes.
rural area. And it may be that that the LA County Sheriff's Department, the fire department, cities would not have the resources to be able to respond to all of the emergencies within that first 2 or 3 days. And we talked about earlier, same thing with utilities. I mean, if your gas or your electricity or your water is shut off, you're on your own. I mean, we can do as much as we can to help, but the more that you can prepare yourself and your family the better off you're going to be. And along the lines of family preparedness, the other thing that we really try to emphasize is to have a family preparedness plan. You know, if you have children who may be in school when a disaster hits, you know, have a plan of how you will reunify your family, or if your family's at work or at school, have a specific point of contact where your family can call somebody outside of the area that may not be impacted by the earthquake, just to report in, just to say, okay, I'm at work, I'm okay. I may not be able to call my spouse who's at work in the Southern California area because of down phone lines, but if you can call somebody outside of the area and everybody knows we need to check in with Aunt so-and-so or Grandma or Grandpa, and that everyone knows that that's the point of contact, that's always very important as well.
A few years ago, there was an earthquake in Southern California, and I had flown up to San Jose, and I was in the courthouse in San Jose appearing for a case, and the people they said something about the earthquake. Have you been in contact with your family? And I didn't even know there had been an earthquake. So I go to the payphone and called, and they said, all the circuits are busy.
Yeah.
And they said, do not call back unless it's an emergency. So I had to wait a while to get, but also my wife's family is from West Texas, and they have tornadoes there. Earthquake's not a problem, but tornadoes mess up things too. And there was a tornado that hit Lubbock a few years ago, probably 30, 40 years ago, maybe now, maybe even a little more. It caused a lot of downtown damage. But the family members, and she had quite a few family members, they were in a panic for a while because they weren't able to, there was no contact with some people. And I think they didn't have anything like a plan for everybody who you would call or anything. So I think that's really a good, the plan to know what you're going to do. Maybe it takes a little time to work it out and put it down so that you have to have it on paper, but you also have to have it in your mind.
Yeah.
But those are all very important because it's too late.
Yeah, and again, the guide that I'm talking about on our website, it's 100 pages, but it also has templates for, you know, these emergency contact information. You know, another thing to think about is an evacuation plan from your home. You know, we're talking about earthquakes, but you know, it could be something like a wildfire or even an earthquake where your home is damaged, where your family has to actually, or a fire in your home, get out and evacuate immediately. It's important, especially if you have children, to talk about what are the exit routes from your home. Where is your unification point? So if half your family is running to the backyard, half your family is running to the front yard, you don't know, are they out, are they in? So just simple things like saying, okay, if we evacuate, we're going to meet here.
You know, in the case of house fires, there have been a lot of cases where somebody's lost their life going back into the house to try to find somebody who is already out.
Yeah. So those are just little things to think about. The other is, and again, this is probably less relevant for earthquake, but it could be a wildfire or another event where you need to be evacuated from your home in a quick manner. Have what we call a to-go kit. And that would be something that you would have, like we talked about, prescription medications, important copies of important documents, birth certificates, passports, insurance policies, those kinds of important documents that if, let's say it was a house fire and you needed to evacuate from your home and you don't have the ability to get back in to get those, put all those in one little bag or some kind of a kit that's accessible where everybody knows where it's at. So if you have to evacuate in a quick manner and leave the house, you're not rummaging through your safe or your file cabinets to look for these things, but it's a to-go kit where you just grab it and you know you've got all that important information, and if you have to leave in a quick manner, you're out the door and you know that you've got that.
Yeah, and we do have in San Dimas some areas that a wildfire would be possible.
Oh, most definitely.
Where we're sitting here, probably not too likely, but I think people learned, at least in that Paradise fire, that you better go as soon as they say go.
Yeah, most definitely. When we're talking about a wildfire situation or any evacuation order, you hear time and time again where people say, no, I'm going to stay and try and protect my home. And there's a reason why the public safety is saying you need to get out. Not only for your own safety, but also for the safety of the firefighters. Because you hear in some situations where people didn't leave, they're in their home, and then the firefighters or the police department have to make a decision. Do we go back in and try and rescue these people, or do we try and fight the fire and protect structure?
Yeah.
And there are times when public safety officers get injured because they're trying to save somebody who should have been evacuated. So that's always a very important. And
Yeah, you are putting other lives at risk.
Yeah,
The people who are going to come, you're putting a bigger burden on them.
And then the other is that, and we also have some situations in the northern foothills, off San Dimas Canyon Road, where there's pretty much one way in, one way out,
Yes.
or one and an alternative. And if you're waiting too late to evacuate, you're trying to leave, and the firefighters or public safety is trying to get to the location where they need to be, then we can create some bottlenecks. So it's always important to evacuate when the order is given.
I was at a recent League of California Cities meeting where they had a panel of people who had been in the big fires. The most recent Malibu, and one of the things that they really stressed is if you don't need to be there, if you're not part of the process for fighting the fire, doing other things, you need to get away and stay away. They were aiming that at city council members too.
Yeah.
Like, unless you have a role there, you don't need to be there. Don't be there.
And
that's the way with the public. You don't want to go to the fire because you may impede the people who are trying to get there to do something. And although there's a great temptation to run to where the fires and other things are, it is really not a good thing to do. And when they've had real crises, people say, that, and they also say that part of that is you put another burden on the first responders because they've got to start protecting you. And all of this is a difficult thing. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Mayor Morris and Ken, this is Marcella. In the earthquake, I noticed people were sleeping outside of their property. On that list, when I go to the webpage, will they have you need a tent or something to stay in if an earthquake struck your home real bad? Or I'm just curious about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about emergency shelters, that is a very common question that we get. People say, well, why don't you let us know in advance if there's an evacuation, where should we go? And we have designated a number of sites throughout the city that could be potential shelters if we needed to house people. But we can't determine what the actual location will be until the incident occurs. We could say that our primary shelter is going to be the community building here at Civic Center, and if the event causes damage to that building, and we've told people this is where you need to go in advance, they'll all come rushing here, and that may not be the place that we
We'll
need.
have a problem.
It may be the high school, or it may be some other facility. So what we tell people is just pay attention to the media, and we'll be putting out information when the time comes as to where the sheltering would be. But you're right that there are a lot of people, especially with the number of aftershocks up in the Ridgecrest area, who don't want to go into any building for fear
Yes.
because of the shaking. So there are a lot of people who camp out in parks and other areas, which is understandable. And then once those aftershocks start to dissipate, then people will feel a little bit more comfortable.
We had a fire here. I'm sure you remember it, on apartments along Baseline, and there were a pretty fair number of them were engaged in the fire, and it was at night, and so the community center was opened up, but that really worked well because people came there, and some people got kind of assembled there, but then they got vouchers for Red Cross and other services, some from us, to find motels and places that they could go and spend the night. But it is you need to be ready to listen to all the advice from people who are telling you what to do. That's one of the things that people talk about. There's still a place for radio in the world.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank
So,
you. Go ahead.
what I was going to ask, though, is it okay to purchase a tent just in case, sometimes for an event like an earthquake or a fire in your home or something like that,
Well, if you feel that's something that you want to have as far as your emergency supplies, then that wouldn't be a bad idea. So whatever you feel comfortable or what you feel you might need, feel free to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So you had mentioned we were starting to talk about emergency communication, and that segues right into my next topic. The city does have an emergency notification system. It's the trade name is Code Red, but what it is, it's a callback system or a call system where if there is an emergency that we need to notify the community about, we can send a message and call you on your phone. It is a system, though, that you need to register for. It used to be, when we first subscribed to this service, was when most people had landline phones, so we could actually get your phone numbers from remember the white pages, the phone book?
A phone book?
Yeah.
What's that?
But now, where most people are cell phone oriented, we don't have access to your phone number unless you actually register with us. So again, if you go on the city's website, there's actually a specific link. It's called Code Red. You can go on and you can put in your telephone number. And so if in the event of an emergency, if we want to push out a message regarding evacuations or evacuation centers or information of an emergency nature, we've got a database. And the system, we have multiple staff members in the Sheriff's Department who can access it. And we can put out a recorded message, and it pushes out to all those phone numbers simultaneously, really. Yeah. It can actually, when we sent out messages in the past, basically it takes about a minute or two to send out messages to thousands of phone numbers.
The web-based systems are phenomenal.
And it actually has a repetitive nature, so if it doesn't get an answer, it'll call you back in another 5 minutes and push out that message. But that's one way that you can actually stay better connected with the city, is to sign up for our Code Red system. We don't over-abuse the system. You're not going to get robocalls or unsolicited calls, but it's designed for, in the event of an emergency, if we want to communicate with the community, this is just one way that we can push out that information. Now again, that's based upon the theory that cell phone service would be available, but it also, it can send text messages, it can send emails, so there's a number of different ways that we can push out that message.
You need to have alternative ways, because in many disasters, the primary way of communicating gets damaged or compromised in some way.
Yeah. And we have, as I said, we train our staff, and we have various levels of getting information out. And the last level is get on a bike and you ride through town and the town crier, basically. I mean, if that's what it takes, then that's how we would communicate with the public. Going back to our training, we train our staff on a regular basis. We have exercises at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, for different scenarios where we actually activate our emergency operations center. We had a training about a year ago where we simulated an earthquake, and one of our primary responsibilities after, say, an earthquake event is that our field staff, which is our Parks and Recreation, our Public Works staff, who are out in the field on a regular basis, their primary responsibility after a significant event like that would be what we call a windshield survey. And they divide up the city by zones, and they drive street by street, and they're not to stop and render aid. They're not to, that's not their job. Their job is to drive through and report back what they see, so that within, hopefully, a half an hour, we can get an assessment of the overall picture of what's the damage like in the city. And we've got systems in place to do that. So we did this exercise about a year ago. where we actually went out and we placed markers throughout the whole community
For them to report.
For them to report. So they would drive down a street, there would be a marker, and they would look at it and say, okay, this bridge is compromised, or I see that there's a structure fire at this location. Report it back in on their radios, and then we have a system where we log in all that information, and then what the management team is doing then is looking at, okay, what's the whole city look like? And the reason that they don't stop and render aid is they could see that there may be a wounded person on the street over here, and they stop and they're trying to prevent first aid, but a block away there could be a multi-story building that's collapsed and there's 100 people that need aid, and they don't know that because they're working on one person.
Right.
So it's kind of a triage kind of effect.
You need to get the basic information to people who can make decisions.
Right, and then you start to understand how to deploy your resources. That's the whole, it's basically what's called the incident command system. And so I guess we want to reassure the community that the city staff does train, we have a plan, but in any kind of emergency, you're really, it's the seat of your pants. It's kind of, you've got the training, but you have to be reactive and be able to react as to the situation that's before you.
Yeah, I've watched the staff in the Emergency Operations Center, and they have, the time I watched, they had people who had different colored T-shirts, and those people had specific jobs based on the color of the T-shirt, and it reminded me of the organization of people on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. When flight operations are going on, the people wear different shirts depending on what they do, and that's a great way to control and know who's doing what, instead of it just being a mob of people. And I thought that was very effective as a part of our emergency operations.
And it's actually, as I said, it's based upon what's referred to as the incident command system, which is, it's a national system, but it's also a statewide system where every jurisdiction, every discipline throughout the state is speaking the same language. It came about a number of years ago. There was a fire in the San Francisco area where there were multiple fire jurisdictions that came to respond to help with this fire, and they realized they all had different size couplings for their fire hoses.
Ooh.
And so there was no, and it just kind of brought to light that there needs to be a uniform system so that everyone is dealing on this, especially if we're going to have mutual aid and we're going to help each other out, and we're all speaking the same language. When we talk about an incident commander, we all know what that person is. When we talk about a logistics manager, we know what that responsibility is. And it kind of goes back when I said, if our employees can't come to our emergency center, they can go to another city, and they can say, I'm trained as a logistics, and it's like, okay, you wear the red logistics vest, and what you've been trained to do logistics in San Dimas is what our people in Ontario have been trained to do as logistics, so it's interchangeable. So it really is inoperable and a unified system, and it works well.
The fire department also, of course, they deal with emergencies, but their structure of when they arrive on station, somebody's in charge.
Yep.
And they know who that person is. And that person stays in charge even if the fire chief shows up until somebody relieves him or her. And that's very important to know. And that person is at a spot. They don't go running all around. And you can't start planning how you're going to deal with the emergency during the emergency.
And that is an example of the same command structure that we have in our EOC and others. The first person, let's say there was an earthquake that hit right now, God forbid, but first person into our emergency operations center is in charge. Now, we have an organizational chart where, as the city manager, ultimately, I would manage the emergency. But if it's a secretary from our planning department who's the first one in, she's in charge.
Until there's a formal handoff.
Right, until somebody comes in, and then who may have higher authority or higher experience, then she hands it off to that person. And it's the same structure. And again, it works in the field and it works in an EOC.
But the key, I think, of all of this is that the people in their own home have to have,
Yeah.
the basic element is what you can do at home, and because these people who, no matter how organized they're only a limited number, and they may not be able to get there.
Yeah. And we also have to, part of our planning and structure is that you may have an event, for example, again, we'll take the earthquakes, which it's a multiple day event, and we have a limited number of staff. And even if everybody could be here, we can't work 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So we would be working in shifts. So it's, you have to have your staff in shifts where, okay, you need to get some rest, and then in 12 hours come back, and then we'll hand it off and you work. And if you're talking 2 or 3 days, we have to work in that capacity. Just like, firefighters and other
I think
emergency responders.
one of the great things, if you look back when FEMA actually created the CERT program, with some guidelines and things like that, and a big part of that is so that a neighborhood with some people trained can then take charge and take over an area, and it works very effectively. You don't have to have every single person trained if there are some who are and are willing to step up when the time comes.
And that's a great example. That we have a couple of apartment complexes in town who have adopted kind of an emergency plan, and a couple of them have very elaborate and effective plans where they have people within their complex. They've identified who are, doctors or nurses or who have certain skills that can help out, and they know what units they're in. They know which people have special needs and may not be able to get out of their apartment in case of an emergency, or those who may be on oxygen. And it's a plan to be self-sustaining within these complexes, but you can do the same thing within your neighborhood. If you've got a neighborhood watch or a CERT program, like you said, that if you and your neighbors get together and decide who has what special skills, who has special needs, that if we have an event, I'm going to knock on so-and-so's door because I know she can't.
Particularly the special needs.
Yeah, because so-and-so can't get out of their home.
Yeah.
So just have a protocol where they can knock on the door. I know this one complex actually has placards that they give all their residents, and they're different colored. So in the event of an emergency, you put your placard on your door, and they can just walk by and say, okay, I'm fine, you don't need to check on me. If there's not a placard on, okay, something's going on here. And you can do the same thing in your neighborhood.
Yeah, great ideas.
Yeah.
And I think one of the CERT, that's really the most powerful part of a CERT program, and is offering this training to people so that and then they can kind of get together in their neighborhood, and it's like the National Night Out, all these kind of things, the sort of the know your neighbors. And one of the reasons is that you need to know their needs and what capabilities they have to be able to help others in an emergency.
Yeah, and same thing with resources. Who in your neighborhood has a generator? It's not everybody needs a generator, but if you know that 2 or 3 people on your block have generators, that's good to know. I know of some neighborhoods where one person is the water person, so they've got 5-gallon drums or gallon or drums in their garage of water, so that's the water go-to person. Somebody else is the canned food person. I mean, it doesn't have to be that elaborate, but it could be if you really wanted to get down to an organization within your neighborhood. Same thing, if you have somebody who has, like I said, doctors or nurses who have those kind of skills, or somebody maybe who works for a utility who knows how to shut off gas lines, then at least you know who to go to, rather than just all of a sudden something happens and it's like, I don't even know who the person next door's name is.
Yep, very difficult for that. One of the public utilities all have trained crews for emergencies, and they're out there doing a lot of things too, but there's a lot to be done. And whether they can get there, and one of the great dangers is if a power line if its live line is down, creates great hazards. So in some cases, like particularly in an earthquake, even you may look around your house, and unless looks like it's going to fall down, being inside that house may be the safest place to be. So you don't want to, you got to be careful where you run to, because that's not always the best, the way to get to be the safest.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of wrap up our emergency discussion, the message really is, please try and take as much responsibility for your own preparedness as you can, and do it now, because history tells us that once an event happens, people are motivated to
For a little while.
For a little while, but the longer you go away from that event, then you start to out of sight, out of mind, and you forget about it. And then, and the other thing is, take incremental steps, because it's so easy to say, this is overwhelming. I can't get kits. I can't do to-go kits. I can't put all these things in my car, or do an evacuation plan for your family. But if you take just a little bit of time and map out something over a several week period, and you take little bites out of it, even if it's just a couple things every week, in a short period of time, you'll realize, gee, we've accomplished more than we thought we could.
But the big thing is start.
Yes, yeah, start. That's it.
Start now.
Yeah. If anything, after you watch this show, do one thing in the next hour to help yourself out with getting yourself prepared.
And if you're like many typical houses, putting it in the garage is not that's not emergency preparation, because you may not be able to find it in the garage. And one of the things that a lot of people may not know is that Los Angeles County has a system of emergency hospitals. When I say emergency hospitals, I mean tents and cots and things. And the depository for those, for Eastern Los Angeles County, is Pomona Valley Hospital Medical Center. So they have all of this equipment in there, and all the fire departments, everybody, the emergency responders know, but they can actually set up a hospital in someplace, or at least, hospital is a relative term. I don't think I'd want to go there for brain surgery, probably, but that they can deal with injuries and everything. But it's a whole big package that's in a storehouse there that the county actually provides it, and periodically they renew parts of it, and to make sure everything is still up to date. So they have that level of preparedness. And I don't believe one of those has ever been mobilized in California, at least in Southern California. But the idea is, if you don't have it, and you don't have, and there are people who are knowledgeable who could take training on how to set it up and all this stuff. And so there's a lot of work goes on, but all of that work may not help you if you can't get to it, or if it's overwhelmed by whatever's happening. So if you start now, you've got a chance to, and hopefully it'll never happen in our lifetimes. We can hope that all of the earthquakes end up being at landers or somewhere where there are no people.
History tells us, though, that's probably not going to happen.
Yes.
The reality is that and the San Andreas Fault, which is the fault that we're most affected by. If you look at where it lies and the infrastructure and the roadways that it crosses,
Yes.
a lot of our major utilities come from Northern California through the Grapevine area, and the San Andreas Fault runs right through there. So if you think that the 5 freeway and all of those major, the water system from Northern California is compromised by a major structure, you can start to realize what we may be isolated.
And the aqueduct from the Colorado River runs over it.
Yeah. Not to scare people, but
No,
that's
but
a reality.
It is the reality, and I think that's it is a good time when people are thinking about it. The other thing is, the Northridge earthquake was on a fault that nobody knew was really a fault, and it wasn't nearly as big, but it was concentrated.
Yeah.
And it caused a tremendous amount of damage. I remember one of the big deals then was the Miller Brewing place started just canning water.
Yep.
In their lines is where they normally would be canning aluminum cans with beer. They canned water, and then they delivered it to their trucks. Delivered it to people to distribute it in Northridge and the other areas.
Yeah, most brewing companies have that, and from what I understand, it's a very easy process for them just to almost flip a switch, and it's just. And
well,
they go
it seemed like it. They were able to respond so quickly.
Yeah, and they have generic, cans available.
Yeah.
And then it just comes out because again we talk about water sources. There's a lot of water in those
It
breweries.
sure is. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling. Hello? I think I hung up instead of taking. Hello, are you there? I apologize. I think I pushed the wrong button. I'm sorry. If you called and I cut you off, please call back.
I guess moving off of, I think we, hopefully that was informative for the community and gave them some good tips. A couple other things that I just wanted to bring to people's attention as we've got a few more minutes left on the show. I think last show we talked about the Sheriff's Booster Club car show that's coming up. That's going to be on July 28th, and it's going to be here in the Civic Center Plaza. It's an all-day event, so you can either show your car or come take in the viewing the cars, entertainment, food. So put that on your calendar. We also have the city birthday celebration, which is going to be on Saturday, August 3rd. That's again here, Civic Center, from 4 to 9 in the afternoon.
Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Sorry about that, Mayor Morris. I was directing this call for you. You mentioned the Northridge earthquake. I had a friend that had apartments there, and he didn't have it insured properly, and it was damaged real bad, and it took years before he can repair it and get his people back in there. So do you recommend that people should purchase insurance or
Well, I'll tell you,
make sure they keep that,
one of the things that they learned in the fires up in Northern California was there were a large number of people who didn't have fire insurance. And earthquake insurance is a different matter because it's expensive and a lot of things, but everybody should have fire insurance. And what they decided caused this was that while you're paying a mortgage, the mortgage company requires you to be insured, and frequently you pay for it out of an impound account. But once the houses were paid off, people were apparently forgot or they're for whatever reason, and I think it was up like something almost 20% of the houses, mostly lived in by older people whose houses were paid for, and they also. But then there was a huge number of people who were underinsured. They had not increased their insurance as values went up. So those people are now in a situation where their house is gone. There's not enough insurance to rebuild, and that was at the conference I attended. They said that was one of the real things that people needed to know about is you need to keep your insurance yearly or whenever it's renewed. You need to always be thinking that you have enough insurance. And if you don't have insurance, you are really taking a big risk. And you're taking a big risk on the most valuable asset you have. And so we do want to encourage people to take a look at your insurance and make sure everything is covered and that you're not using a value from 10 or 20 years ago, because it may not be enough.
Thank you, Mayor, for that advice. Yes,
Well,
thank you for that advice. I appreciate that.
Well,
Have a nice day.
thanks for reminding us.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think I was mentioning the city birthday. And also that same day, and I think we mentioned this 2 weeks ago, is the Historical Society, the San Dimas Historical Society, is going to have a celebration of the 10th anniversary of the restoration of the Walker House. So starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, they're going to have a ceremony and also be giving tours throughout the day with refreshments from 10 till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if people want to come and you haven't been to the Walker House in a while, you can have a docent guided tour. So that's going to be a busy day for the community on that Saturday.
And I think probably the downtown merchants will be having some kind of sales and other events. If you happen to be down by the Walker House, it's another block, and you can be down, walk down Bonita and take a look at our beautiful red geraniums.
Yeah, make a day with the white flowers in the trees.
With the white flowers in the trees.
We were talking today. We said we got to find something blue to add to that. So maybe some blueberry bushes so that we can have the red, white, and blue.
We need something, but But there'll be a lot of activities going on that whole Saturday.
Yeah.
And I believe also they're going to have like the public safety people will have displays here.
Yeah, we're kind of combining the National Night Out activities with the city birthday. So we're going to have a lot of public safety displays, especially geared towards children. I think we're going to have a shake house talking about emergency preparedness, which is kind of an educational tool where children can go in and it simulates an earthquake and teaches them how to, duck and cover, and a lot of other activities. I think there's actually a display that's geared towards bullying and how to handle bullying situations for children. So there's going to be a lot of activities that will be geared towards children and public safety.
Good. And all of this is absolutely free except the dinner itself, and the dinner is very inexpensive, particularly if you buy in advance. And this is truly deep pit barbecue because we got the pit.
Yes, definitely.
Right out
You
here.
can verify that it's deep pit.
It's a deep pit, and it's everything in San Dimas is traditional. The people who work for the fire department build the fire and get it all ready to do the cooking, and they put the meat in. There's another group of people who prepare the meat and put it into containers wrapped with some wire and aluminum foil. But it's amazing that on the evening before, on Friday evening, there'll be a lot of people here working, and it's the same people who've been doing it for years. There's always new people because people are always invited to come and join. But so it's a great event, and it comes out the next morning, or actually around noon, I think.
Yeah.
They start bringing the meat out of the deep pit barbecue. So it's a real experience, and the price is very reasonable, and everything else is free.
Yep. Entertainment
is free, and there will be a band, and so there'll be a lot of things to do. So the 3rd of August is a good day to come downtown and take a look around.
A couple other activities coming up. Speaking of public safety, the Los Angeles County Sheriff Villanueva is setting up town hall meetings throughout the LA County, where he's coming out to communities that have sheriff stations and contract cities and holding town hall meetings just to get feedback and information from the community as far as public safety needs. And the town hall meeting that's scheduled here in San Dimas is going to be on July 25th, which is coming up. It's going to be in our community building. If you go to the city's website or the Sheriff's Department's website, you can get more information about the time and information about that event. Also, for those you who may have household hazardous waste around your house, pesticides, paints, anything that you can't throw in your trash and you need to dispose of, there's going to be a roundup at Citrus College in Glendora on July 20th. Again, if you go to our website, you can get information about what's acceptable there, the times, and how to proceed with that. And lastly, we have a major street project that we're going to be starting up around July 29th, and it's going to be on Avenida Entrada from Calle Linda to Paseo Corrado and all the cul-de-sac streets that are off of that. It's a project that's going to take probably close to 2 months, and the streets will be open throughout the entire time. However, there may be some limited access for some of the residents on that street. We have had one community meeting that we've held with the residents to let them know the impacts of this project. There's going to be another one coming up. But it also is, one of the primary accesses to Villa Verde Country Club. So, keep an eye again on our website, and we'll give you more information about the actual dates of when that'll start and the actual impacts. There will be no time when you will not have access throughout that neighborhood, but it could be limited and there could be some delays. So if you live in that area or travel that area on a regular basis, keep an eye out for that. So those are kind of my updates.
I think if you've heard, Ken has put a big emphasis on check the website, because we have done a lot of work to make it more usable and to put a lot more information on it. So we're thinking of start now. Tonight would be a good time to take a look at the website and just put it in your mind that once a week or so you'll check it, because that's one of the ways we're trying to communicate with people about our parks and recreation programs everything we do, we're trying to make that website something that's very valuable to people, but it's only valuable to those who look at it. So
Yeah.
please do.
And we do have a way that you can sign up. We do a weekly e-blast on Fridays that we send out information, but again, you have to register for that because we're not mind readers. We don't know your email address unless you give it to us. So there's that, and we also have presence on Facebook and Twitter. So we're trying to get ways to get the information out.
And the great thing about that, if you happen to like to go to yard sales, we encourage people to list their yard sales, and we put that out on that blast on Friday, so you'll know where all the yard sales are and you can be there first.
Okay. Well, I think we're about out of time.
Okay, good. So thank you for watching, and thank you for calling.